In fact, on a lot of discussion sites, they won't allow you to discuss about things like that. They'll kick you out if you try and bring it up.
Oh, wow.
Well, you can't turn him into a company man. You can't turn him into a whore. And the boys upstairs just don't understand anymore.
I've seen research sites where they collect sightings that say, well, if you have seen Bigfoot and a UFO, don't tell us about it. We don't want to know about it. Don't waste our time.
Oh, man.
These are people who claim to be researchers and want to collect sightings, but only the sightings that they want to know about, apparently.
And there goes the last DJ who plays what he wants to play and says what he wants to say. Hey, hey, hey. And there goes your freedom of choice.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, Binnall of America Audio with your host, Tim Binnall.
Hello there, my friends. This is Tim Binnall of BinnallofAmerica.com with another edition of BOA Audio Season 2. It is June 23rd, 2007, and this week is the penultimate episode of BOA Audio Season 2. I'm already feeling a little nostalgic as we head towards the finale. We are very, very close to the final episode of Binnall of America Audio Season 2. That, of course, will be coming next week. This week, we have an amazing episode for you. Our guest is Lisa Scheel, author of Backyard Bigfoot, The True Story of Stick Signs, UFOs, and the Sasquatch. She has had a number of amazing personal experiences, both in Texas and Michigan, with a number of strange elements that she attributes to the Bigfoot, including stick signs and horses' manes being braided overnight by mysterious perpetrators. We're going to go in depth on the stick signs and mane braiding. Plus, we're going to be talking about problems with the evolution theory and also issues with the Gigantopithecus theory that is very popular in cryptozoology as an explanation for the Bigfoot. Lisa's going to explain why the Gigantopithecus theory is not all it's cracked up to be. Additionally, we're going to be talking about cryptozoology's infamous natural versus paranormal Bigfoot debate, UFOs and Bigfoot, Lisa's take on being a woman in cryptozoology, big picture speculation on what the Bigfoot might be, and much, much more. We are really smashing the fourth wall of cryptozoology here this week on the program. We are going to be delving inside and outside the field with Lisa Scheel, author of Backyard Bigfoot. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Lisa Scheel, let me give you a little background on her. Lisa Scheel is the author of Backyard Bigfoot, The True Story of Stick Signs, UFOs, and the Sasquatch, a 4-Word Magazine 2006 Book of the Year finalist. Critics have praised Backyard Bigfoot, saying it is as informative as it is entertaining. It is one of the best types of investigative reporting I've seen, and you may agree or not with her conclusions, but you'll be entertained by the discussions. Lisa was recently elected president of the Upper Peninsula Publishers and Authors Association. As a recognized Bigfoot expert, Lisa has been interviewed by big city newspapers, drive time talk radio hosts, local and national magazines, and TV reporters. In 2005, she founded the Michigan Upper Peninsula Bigfoot Organization, MUPBO, to explore all aspects of the Bigfoot phenomenon, from sightings to evolution to UFOs. Lisa has a master's degree in library science, and she currently pens a blog, Bigfoot Quest, as a companion to the MUPBO site. Her website is www.upbigfoot.com. Pretty simple to spell, upbigfoot.com, upbigfoot.com. Without any further ado, let's rock and roll. This interview is ultra fresh. It was recorded on June 19th, 2007. Lisa Scheel talking about the Backyard Bigfoot on Binnall of America Audio, Season 2. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of Binnall of America Audio, Season 2. And this week, our guest is Lisa Scheel. She's the author of Backyard Bigfoot, The True Story of Stick Signs, UFOs, and the Sasquatch, which is just an amazing book. I really enjoyed it a lot. An awesome way of weaving in her own personal research in with some great research into a variety of aspects of the Bigfoot phenomenon that I personally hadn't done my own research into, like Gigantopithecus type stuff and evolution theory and problems with that when you try and work it into the Bigfoot. So really an education for me, and I appreciated that a lot. And we've got her here on the program to discuss all things Bigfoot and the backyard Bigfoot. Lisa Shield, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Well, let's start out first with your bio and the background and, where you came from and how you gravitated towards the Bigfoot and research into the esoteric.
Well, I've been interested in weird things for a long time, since I saw my first UFO when I was about 14. Then in college, I started getting interested in alternative history and starting to doubt the standard story about the way things happened in the world. And then about 6 years ago, I started really intensely researching Bigfoot and evolution and other related phenomena for a novel that I was writing. And since then, I've been pretty much full tilt into Bigfoot research and also UFOs. For a while, I was the chief investigator for Michigan MUFON. Now I'm independent, doing my Bigfoot and UFO research, and basically anything weird anybody wants to report to me.
There you go. I have here that one of your books, one of your first books, was a Hunt for Bigfoot, a novel, which was obviously a fiction book. What made you decide to switch from fiction to nonfiction and to delve into, like putting out your own research type of stuff instead of telling narratives?
Well, first of all, I had done so much research into these topics that I thought I had a lot to say about it. And then I had my personal experiences with Bigfoot that I wanted to share too, and some things that other Bigfoot books don't deal with, topics that I hadn't read about. Most Bigfoot books, they push the Gigantopithecus theory heavily and don't talk much about other theories, and they don't really talk about evolution much, and no other book really talks about stick signs, which are something that I have had a lot of experiences with. So I wanted to share those experiences and also all my research into these other aspects of the Bigfoot phenomenon and things that I consider to be related, like UFOs and other high strangeness and the evolution and human origins and all of that, and just kind of throw it all together to try and make a coherent story.
Well, let's dive into your personal experience here, your own personal research into the Bigfoot and these strange phenomena. Let's start with the big one, as you say, stick signs. Let's hear how your research into the stick sign phenomenon sort of began.
Well, it started when I found the first one. But, of course, at first I didn't think it was Bigfoot. In 2003, in November, I noticed this little cross formation, these two sticks that were laid one over the other like a cross right alongside a trail, not under a tree, not where there were other sticks lying around. It stood out very definitely. And I thought that was strange. But I still kind of dismissed it as a natural thing and went on. And my novel didn't come out until January of 2004, so this was before that came out. And I started finding more of these, and in 2004 I found a whole bunch of stick signs of various kinds, triangles and V-shapes and T's and sort of complex ones that mixed the varieties together. And then I found a footprint in 2004, which looked just almost exactly like pictures I had seen of Bigfoot footprints in sandy soil, usually along creek beds. This was not in a creek bed. It was in dry, sandy loam, they call it in Texas. It's very powdery soil. And this footprint looked just exactly like the photos I had seen. And I started to think, well, my neighbors wouldn't be doing this. And besides, how would they have known to do something like this to try and fool me? Because my book hadn't come out when this first started. And I have dogs, too. At the time, I had 6 dogs who had free reign over the 6 acres that I lived on. And so why would people be doing this? Besides, I had mostly elderly neighbors and some families, but not the kind of people who would be creeping around putting sticks in little shapes along trails on my property, hoping I would notice them.
Yeah.
It didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And when I found that footprint, I started thinking, well, this is something Bigfoot might do. But I had not read anything like this. In my research about Bigfoot, I had seen where researchers would find bent-over saplings and things like that they attributed to Bigfoot, but nothing like what I was finding. So I just kept collecting the photos and documenting it, keeping track of everything that I found, and I finally came to the conclusion that I think this is Bigfoot doing this. because I found the tracks, and I have heard strange screams and other strange sounds, and I heard something chasing my horse one night, and just a lot of things that kind of come together and led me to the conclusion that it was Bigfoot related.
Since the book's come out and your research has come out, have you gotten other people to come forward and say that they had discovered that kind of thing? Have it become more pervasive than you thought?
Yes, I have been communicating with a man in New York State who says that he's finding these kinds of things. His are a little different. He sent me some photos, and they're definitely unusual things he finds. They're like bundles of sticks up in trees. And the only thing I can think of that would do that would be like a flood, but I asked him if there had been any floods in that area, and he said no. So it's strange and intriguing, but not having been to that area, I can't, say, oh yes, this is Bigfoot, but
yeah,
it's definitely intriguing. And I also had a friend here in Michigan, in the UP, the Upper Peninsula where I live, who thinks that he has found some on his property. And he said he had just never looked for anything like that before, even though he's been interested in Bigfoot, because he had never heard of that sort of thing. But he believes he's found some of them. I've been stick signs too. So I have been finding other people now who are coming forward and telling me about it.
Based on all these different stick signs you've seen, now obviously this is speculative, but have you come to any sort of conclusion maybe about what they might be? Are they communications with you? Are they communications with other Bigfoot? Are they markers of territory? I mean, have you come to any sort of idea maybe of what they might be all about?
At first I thought maybe they were trail markers, because I would always find them along trails that horses and deer and other animals would frequent. But then I started making my own signs and having them changed overnight. And then I started thinking, well, maybe that's some kind of communication. I don't know what we're saying, but we're definitely communicating. I leave my sign and they change it. So that's like, I'm saying, I know you're here, and they're saying, yeah, we know you know we're here. I don't know what we're saying, but then I've had some people tell me, well, how do you know you're not saying something that's going to make them mad? But I think if they were going to get mad about it, they would have done it already.
When you moved to Michigan, then you began to notice they were happening there too. So it may not just be like an isolated type thing to the Bigfoot of the Texas area, right?
Right, yeah. And like I said, I've been talking to a guy in New York who has found some stick formations too. So I think it's pretty widespread, and just most people don't notice it or don't recognize it or look for it. Most Bigfoot researchers are looking for other things like footprints and hairs and other signs like that are kind of bigger and more obvious, and they're not really looking around for sticks. And you have to go through the same area every day so that you know what belongs there, what was there the day before, and what wasn't, in order to see these things.
And then, well, let's get this one out of the way right now. What do you say to the skeptics and the debunkers and the really skeptical people that say, well, you're seeing things, or you're attaching too much value to these stick signs, or it could have been a squirrel, or any of I'm sure you've heard it all. So what do you say to the people that think that you're seeing things that aren't there as far as the stick signs go?
Well, there are always going to be people like that who, no matter how much evidence you have, they're not going to accept it. There are debunkers who their sole purpose in life is to harass researchers. I don't want to spend a lot of time worrying about those people. I just present the evidence and my investigation of it, explain how I ruled out various things, and it's up to the reader to decide whether they believe it or not.
There you go. I like that attitude. Once you kind of established or thought you established that there was a Bigfoot in the area, what kind of stuff did you do to, I guess, like, get more information? I know you got, like, a hair there and stuff like that. Did you ever, like, try and stake out the area? Although, I guess you say it was, like, 6 acres, so it must have been kind of impossible to stake out six acres. But did you ever, like, try and, hide out and watch the Bigfoot or set a trap or anything crazy like that?
No, I mean, I've considered things like that, and I have a game camera that I put in various places. I now live on 40 acres, so that's a larger area to try and monitor. I put the game camera in different places, but I don't really expect to get a Bigfoot on a game camera, because I think they're too smart for that. Even large animals like cougars and wolves are very wary of things like game cameras. And I get very few pictures of wolves, even though I know they're around here. I've heard them, and I've seen a cougar not 100 feet from my house, but I've never gotten a picture on the game camera of one. So any kind of large animals like that are used to hiding and staying out of sight, they don't fall for that when you put a camera on a tree and it's camouflage colored. That doesn't really fool them too much.
If someone were listening to this and they were going to go out and look for these kind of stick signs and stuff like that, what would you recommend they specifically look for? Like you said, you should know the area and know, if you go there tomorrow and then you go there the day after, if things are different the day after, then you know obviously that it changed. But what kind of signs, no pun intended, should they look for stick signs?
Well, yeah, like you just said, and I said before, you have to know the area. And these generally appear overnight, so if there was nothing there the day before and this appears overnight, you know it's something different and unusual. And if you look for something that's in an area where there are no other loose sticks lying around, it's not right under a tree that has lots of sticks falling off it. They're usually along pathways, like the game trails the deer and other animals go down. And you look for things like parallel sticks, cross sticks, things that really stand out. When you look at them, you can't miss them. Geometric shapes, of course, are the best because that's really obvious. When you see a triangle sitting there or a square, well, that's not natural. And you look off. Sometimes the stick signs incorporate other things that besides sticks too. So things like pieces of dead grass and reeds and things that didn't come from the area where you find them. That's another thing to look for.
Yeah, you had a great picture and story in the book with a stick sign that had like a feather sticking out of it, which was really amazing. I mean, that's the kind of thing that you'd show to a skeptic and be like, "What? Dude, how did a dog make this?"
I know. I've had people say, well, maybe bears do it. I've never known a bear to do that. I've seen lots of bears around here. I haven't seen any of them carrying feathers and sticks around.
I'm going to make a suggestion here. This is what I would try. Now, I know you put a magazine out there. I would put maybe a pencil and a piece of paper, or a pen and a piece of paper, just to see maybe if they would draw something, or instead of doing the stick sign, maybe they would scribble something on the piece of paper.
Maybe, you never know.
I'm going to throw that out there. I think you should try that, and this could be the breakthrough right there, the pen,
there you go.
Pen and paper Bigfoot test. Now, during this time with the stick signs, and we're going to get to the other exciting stuff with the horses, but during this time, did you ever see a Bigfoot? Did you ever see anything that you thought might have been a Bigfoot?
I've had glimpses. Just last summer, I saw a dark shape in the woods. I had been outside and heard these two ravens squawking, really squawking, flying around in circles above the woods. And there was this clearing back in the woods a little bit. And I could see the sun shining into that clearing, and there was this dark shape standing there. It was taller than a bear or a horse. And then it kind of turned sideways and disappeared behind a tree. That's the best glimpse I've had so far. Yeah. But I've heard whooping calls, which are very unusual and distinctive, and don't sound like any creature that I'm familiar with.
Now, to move on to the amazing stuff here with the horses, this is just amazing, and I checked out your blog, and it sounds like this is probably one of the most popular aspects of the book. That's the mane braiding, where apparently overnight, you'd go out to your horses the next morning, and overnight, someone or something had braided the hair of your horses. Talk a little bit about this, because I'm just completely amazed by it, and just stunned and intrigued.
Well, I've lived around horses my whole life, and I can tell you horses don't get their manes tangled into these complicated, twisted braids that I found in their manes, and it started about the same time as I started finding stick signs. But again, at first, I didn't think, oh, Bigfoot's doing this. I thought, well, maybe some neighbor kids are coming over and, petting the horses at the fence and doing this. But these are really intricate braids. I have unraveled a number of them, and they're very hard to unravel. Sometimes you can't even unravel them. I have to just cut them out to get them out of the horse's mane. It's several locks that are twisted individually and then braided together, and there'll be a little loop, and it's all tucked back under, so it's hard to describe. You kind of have to see a picture of it.
Yeah.
And on my blog, I put a little link to a little video of me unraveling one, because that kind of demonstrates how complicated they are. But gradually I started to wonder about these because I kept finding so many of them. And when horses' manes get tangled, it looks like a tangle. It doesn't look graceful or intricate. It just looks like a big tangle in their hair. And these are very different, and they appear overnight. And the morning that I find these braids, the horses will be very happy and excited, like they've been having a great time all night. And then I started reading about in other places in the world where people think that Bigfoot braid their horses' manes. In fact, in Russia, one young researcher sat in a barn and waited and said that he saw a Bigfoot come in and braid the mane of a horse. So,
oh, wow.
Some interesting evidence that this is Bigfoot related. And it occurs like in the same places where I find the stick signs, you know. And Bigfoot seem to be attracted to horses. That's something that's been demonstrated over time. A lot of witnesses have horses. And in fact, the Patterson film, which is a very famous film footage of a Bigfoot, it was filmed in 1967, and the two men who saw that Bigfoot were on horseback at the time. So it's interesting to wonder if their horses might have attracted the Bigfoot.
Yeah. Now, was the mane braiding, was that going on in Texas, and then when you moved to Michigan, did it keep going on, or was it isolated to one or the other part of the country?
No, it's happened in both places, although it's happening a lot more up here. In fact, just the other day, I found the mane braid, and that's the one that's in the video of me unraveling it. That was just a few days ago.
Now, have you tried putting the game camera in a location that would, keep an eye on the horses, or put a video camera there that would watch the horses to see if you could catch anything coming into the barn?
Oh, yeah, tried that. Get nothing. Cameras just don't fool them. No, it doesn't even fool cougars, so you can't expect a Bigfoot to fall for it and walk right in front of your camera. It's not going to happen, in my opinion.
Well, I figured I'd throw it out there because I assume if I was in this situation, I'd be trying all the same stuff you apparently did try.
Right, yeah. I've tried a lot of different things.
I bet. You say the horses appeared happy and excited when you came out there the next day when their manes were braided. You would think it would stand to reason that they would be pretty freaked out by a Bigfoot, but in the book you kind of suggest that maybe the Bigfoot acclimated themselves to the horses and slowly over time then the horses kind of came to accept the Bigfoot as coming around. You think that's how it went down?
Well, I think that's probably, and it might be juvenile Bigfoots that do this who would be shorter, more like human stature. But if they start slowly, I mean, that's how you get an animal to trust you, is you start slowly and you give them time to adjust. You don't walk right up and try and pet them. So they could have done something like that.
And then let's talk a little bit about some of the other exciting stuff you captured on the game camera, because you have quite a great chapter in there about the orbs and some really cool pictures there with the orbs and an amazing picture of this flying plate thing that is awesome that I want you to talk about, in the red wolves that are supposedly extinct that apparently are on that you got a picture of. So talk a little bit about these exciting things that you managed to capture with the game camera.
Well, in Texas, where I lived for 15 years, there were supposed to be no wolves. They were supposed to be extinct in Texas. And in fact, there aren't supposed to be any red wolves almost anywhere. There's one place, I think it's in Wisconsin, where they released some into the wild. But Texas, there aren't supposed to be any red wolves or cougars. I saw a cougar once when I was there. I knew a lot of people saw them, but they weren't supposed to be there. And the red wolves, not supposed to be there, but I got a picture of one on the game camera. And I went to, there was a wildlife park not too far from where I lived, and they had red wolves. And I went there, kind of look at them and take pictures of them and compare it to the picture I had. And in my opinion, they look identical. It's not a coyote, it's a red wolf, which is not supposed to exist in Texas.
Yeah.
But there it is on the game camera. And the orbs, that was something really strange. I have seen orbs since then myself, but at the time I had not seen any yet. I started getting these weird little balls of light on the game camera. And not all at night either, some in the daytime. In fact, there's one picture in the book of my dogs, and behind the dogs you can see this little orb floating in the air. And I went through the whole thing, are these dust, are these insects, something like that, and came to the conclusion they're not, because I've seen pictures with bugs in them, and you can tell it's an insect. fact, on the game camera, I had one picture of a spider with a flash lighting it, and it looks pretty strange, but it's a spider. So these orbs are clearly different. And I also have pictures of raindrops, and you can see the difference between them and these orbs because the raindrops are a lot more transparent and not as clear as the orbs. And these orbs have very bright rims and kind of mottled center. And I've gotten pictures of them in the dark when the flash did not go off. And yet you can see these orbs clearly. Must be self-illuminated because the flash did not go off. And there was no other source of light there. It was dark.
What I thought was really cool is in one of the pictures, the orbs have like a motion. They have like a motion blur, but they're going upwards. So it completely sort of takes away the idea that they could be rain or anything like that.
Right. I've got pictures where you can see that they've got a motion trail going up, and they're coming up out of the ground because it's just above the ground.
Oh, wow.
And it looks like they're coming up out of the ground.
And talk about the flying paper plate picture, because that one's just weird and really cool. And I looked at it probably for like at least 20 minutes trying to figure out what it could be, and I still have no idea.
Right, that's a really strange one. The game camera senses heat and motion in a very small part of the picture, not across the whole photo that you can see, but through a small part of it in the center. So something in that small area had to be giving off heat and moving. Clearly this thing that looks like a paper plate floating in the air was moving, but it must have been giving off heat too, because it has to be both for the game camera to be triggered. And you can see a little shadow under the paper plate. So it's clearly an object in the air because it's got a shadow, and it's just hanging there, or else moving but not fast enough to have a motion blur. And that was on a night when there was no wind. So it wasn't a Walmart bag floating by, unless Walmart bags have become self-propelled. So it's just a very strange thing. It looks, for the life of me, it looks like a paper plate flying through the air.
Yeah. It's a great picture, and that's in the book, so that's definitely worth checking out. Now, like we've talked here about all this great personal research you've done. As an author, talk about using that first person in the story. That's kind of a big risk because you put yourself out there big time for the opinions of every clown who wants to share their opinion. And the next thing you know, you put yourself out there as the main target in the book, kind of. I mean, that's a big risk. I really respect that.
Well, it was only natural because of the experiences I've had, and that's what I wanted to talk about. So it became a personal story because of that. And when I decided I wanted to talk about the 6 signs and the other weird things that have happened to me, the main braiding and the flying orbs and all that stuff, I had to talk about it in the first person because it all happened to me.
Yeah.
And that's something that's pretty unusual in Bigfoot books. You don't find many that talk in the first person unless it's a witness who's written a book about their ongoing encounters with Bigfoot, but there aren't even that many of those. Most Bigfoot books are basically collections of sightings and a researcher who's writing in a very detached tone, talking about the witnesses and what they saw. So I wanted to do something different, first of all, and I wanted to present the things that happened to me, so it had to become personal. And I don't really care if people call me crazy. You should read some of the comments on my blog. It doesn't bother me at all.
Well, we've talked about here on the show in ufology, when a witness comes forward, a lot of times they're kind of put through the ringer or shunned or kind of kept on the outside of the field, if you will. So have you experienced anything sort of like that where, you're kind of on the fringe of the cryptozoology scene because you have the experiences and maybe they don't think you're unbiased or you're not detached enough from the scene in a way. Do you know what I mean? Right.
Yeah, well, and I've sort of purposely kept myself separate and independent because I just don't want to get involved in all that bickering. And there's an awful lot of that in cryptozoology, especially Bigfoot research, a lot of bickering, because there are 2 camps. One says it's a giant ape, nothing else, and another that wants to talk about paranormal aspects of it, UFOs and other strange things. So there's a lot of vehement debate between those groups. And I decided early on I didn't want to get involved in that. I want to talk about, UFOs and all the strange things, but I don't want to try and be a part of that whole community. I mean, I communicate with other Bigfoot researchers some who agree with me, some who don't. But I don't make a big effort to try and be in their club. This is not important to me. I do my thing, and I talk to the witnesses who come to me. And that's what I like to do, is the research, not so much the networking.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about that divide in cryptozoology in a little bit. We're kind of going to dive in now to the straight research aspects of the book and leave the personal parts behind a little bit. So let's first talk about the evolution theory and the problems that you found with it, because it seems like the way you broke it down in the book, they really don't know what's going on, and it sounds like every time they dig up a skeleton, they want to add it to just a big mess of confusion, which seems to have overtaken, them trying to put together a linear line of skeletons from the first human to the last. It sounds like they just keep messing it up in a way. So talk a little bit about the evolution theory and that kind of stuff.
Right. Well, nobody wants to be the latest person to discover another Homo erectus skeleton. They all want to have their own new species that they found. So it becomes this big jumble of, well, I found some new bones, so I'm going to call this, a species named after me or named after where I found it. I'm going to have discovered a new species. So that's kind of what drives this whole mess of hominid species. And it has become a real jumble, very hard to decipher, and that's because they don't really know what's going on.
Yeah.
They find some bits of bone scattered over a big area. They bring them together and try and remake what the creature looked like, but it's all bits and pieces that have been crushed and scattered, and they find them laying out on the ground. I mean, most people have this picture of anthropologists out there digging in the dirt, kind of like archaeologists digging way down and finding things, and finding a skeleton laying there, but that's not really how it happens most of the time. They find things laying on top of the ground, scattered and crushed in many thousands of little pieces, and then they have to piece them together. So when you see a picture of a reconstructed skeleton of a hominid, especially when you see like a skull, you'll often see dark material in between pieces of white, and that's because dark material is the missing bone. So all that you have is these fragments of bone that they've pieced back together the way they think it looked. And so the whole theory of evolution is based on, well, the theory of human evolution is based on these fragmentary remains that they have found. And also then the DNA evidence, which is another issue altogether.
Yeah.
Another confusing mess, because they've done DNA studies looking at modern human DNA to try and backtrack to figure out where humans came from. And depending on which study you believe or which study you're reading at the moment, you'll come to a different conclusion about where humans came from. The one you hear about most of the time is the African Eve theory, where they claim that they could tell by looking at the DNA of modern women that the first modern human woman came from Africa. But they only studied 147 women. And of their African women, only 2 had actually been born on the African continent. So they were using this small group to try and tell us where billions of people came from. And other scientists who still subscribe to the theory of evolution admit that, well, it depends how you put that information into your computer program and how many times you run the software. It'll turn out different locations, different dates for where modern humans came from. Because what they do is they get the DNA, they do their analysis, they plug that in the computer, and then the software spits out the information for them. And it all depends on how many times you run it and how you interpret what it tells you, and there are thousands of interpretations.
Yeah.
So it's not this cut and dried, humans came from Africa 200,000 years ago. It depends on how you look at it.
Exactly, and you kind of make a point in the book that there seems to be kind of almost a desperation to make it work. They'll get the slightest glimmer of hope, and then they'll slam the crap out of it in National Geographic or something, just because they want people to buy into this really bad. It seems like there's a real desperation to get people to jump on board and buy into this.
Right. They are desperate to defend the theory of evolution, and recently we've had the thing about the presidential debate where the Republicans were asked if they believe in evolution. And the ones who raise their hands and say they didn't believe in it have been just smashed in the media because of that. And so the people the scientists who are the main ones who believe in evolution, because polls have shown that a majority of people in this country don't believe in evolution. So the people who are trying to defend evolution like to talk, the only opposition is from creationists. But, I mean, there are Christians who don't subscribe to the strict view of creationism. There are people who are Christians but believe in evolution. So they're not all creationists. They're different kinds of Christians, but they present it as if all Christians are against evolution and believe that the earth was created 6,000 years ago. But that's just not the case. And there are people who don't believe in evolution who aren't even Christians. And there are other ways to look at it, but they just try and make it like you're a religious zealot if you don't believe in evolution, because that's an easy way for them to dismiss it.
Yeah, you can definitely see how they frame it that way and really shortchange a lot of people who are trying to get a different point of view across. Now, based on what you've researched into this evolution theory and the various, I wouldn't call them artifacts, bones and stuff that they found, where do you think the hairy hominid, as you call it, the Bigfoot, where do you think he fits into the whole equation? Did it exist alongside the humans and come along with us all along, or is it something that sort of sprouted off from humans, or humans sprouted off from him, or do you have an opinion on sort of like where the hairy hominid fits into the history of the human species?
Well, I think they are the descendants of the ancient hominids, Homo erectus and all those, and that we are not. That we were created, but not by evolution. In fact, I'm not convinced that any creatures have evolved, because there's just so much evidence of these weird things happening, like Lazarus species that will disappear and be gone for millions of years and then pop back up. How does that happen if it's evolving?
Yeah.
That just doesn't make much sense. So I think the Bigfoot, which in my book I call them hairy hominids when I'm talking on my blog or talking to people. I usually call them Bigfoot because people get confused if I call them hairy hominids and I don't explain what I mean by that. But I think they are descended from those hominids, and the people are not. But we may be related in some way. Like, whoever created us may have mixed in a little of their DNA to make us look kind of like them. But we're not like their brothers that close, maybe like a distant cousin.